The night began in the familiar confines of my childhood bedroom, yet the atmosphere felt entirely foreign and heavy with anticipation. At 20 years old, I was caught in the relentless grip of a physical agony so profound it felt as though my body was being dismantled from within. There were no white-coated doctors, no sterile hospital corridors, and no promise of modern medicine to dull the edges of the trauma. My world had shrunk to the small, flickering shadow of a kerosene lamp on the nightstand, and the rhythmic, haunting creak of a buggy approaching through the vast darkness outside. I was a young Amish woman standing on the precarious precipice of motherhood, anchored only by the steady, calloused grip of my mother's hand. I was completely unaware that 12 grueling hours of labor lay ahead of me, or that this night would forever change how I viewed my own strength. In the silence between my screams, the flickering flame was the only witness to the beginning of my long, painful journey into the light.
In the English world, home birth is often perceived as a trendy or carefully planned lifestyle choice, supported by certified professionals and the safety net of nearby modern facilities. However, for those of us raised within the strict traditions of the old order, it was never a choice. It was the only reality we were permitted to know. Hospitals represented far more than just medical intervention. They symbolized a total surrender of the soul to outside secular control and English influence. We were taught from a young age that a woman's body belonged solely to God, and therefore the immense pain of childbirth was His to measure and ours to endure with silent grace. To seek a hospital was to admit a lack of faith, often inviting a subtle, heavy shroud of communal shame that lingered long after the birth. We labored in the profound privacy of our own bedrooms, tucked away from the modern world with nothing but prayer and ancient traditions to anchor us through the storm of delivery.
My midwife, Mrs. Stoltzfus, was a woman of 65 who carried the profound wisdom of 500 births within her weathered, steady hands. In our world, there were no high-tech ultrasounds to glimpse the life growing within, or complex blood tests to monitor my failing health. There was only her experienced touch during my final trimester. She would visit monthly, pressing her palms firmly against my belly to discern the baby's position through sheer intuition and decades of practice. Her pharmacy was not a shelf of synthetic pills, but a vibrant garden of sacred herbs, raspberry leaf tea to strengthen the uterus, and shepherd's purse to stem the flow of blood. She brought no empty promises of ease or comfort, only the quiet, unshakable confidence of tradition that had been passed down through generations. She relied on the ancient rhythms of nature and the steady beat of the human heart, trusting that the old ways remained the best ways for a woman to bring new life into the silent, waiting world.
In our community, modesty is a pillar of daily life, yet the birthing room is the one sanctuary where those rigid rules finally dissolve. As my mother laid plastic sheeting under the linens and boiled string for the cord, the world of long sleeves and hidden forms vanished into the shadows. When the labor intensified at 4 a.m, I gripped the oak headboard until my nails left permanent, jagged grooves in the wood. Amidst my cries and desperate prayers for the pain to cease, my mother whispered ancient hymns from the Ausbund, our traditional hymnal. The melody was somber and slow, a haunting reminder that I was merely a single link in an eternal, sacred chain of women who had survived this trial since the days of Eve. The singing did not dull the physical trauma, but it provided a psychological anchor, reminding me that I was not alone in the darkness. In those hours,
My body was no longer a vessel of modesty, but a battlefield of raw human endurance.
At 2 in the afternoon, my son was finally placed upon my chest, his warmth a heavy, grounding anchor that kept me from drifting away in my absolute exhaustion. He weighed 8 pounds, a perfect life born from hours of silent suffering. But the relief was tragically short-lived. Mrs. Stoltzfus discovered a severe tear and, without a hint of anesthesia or numbing agent, began to repair my broken body with a common needle and thread. I was told to bite down on a thick leather strap, and I did so with such violent intensity that my teeth left deep, permanent indentations in the hide. Those 10 minutes of repair were a sharper, more haunting agony than the 12 grueling hours of labor that had preceded them. In that moment, the joy of my firstborn was eclipsed by a raw, stinging trauma that no one in my community would ever discuss. I was left to heal in the quiet, expected to return to my chores and my life as if the pain had never happened. By the time my 8th child was ready to enter the world, the traditional ways reached a breaking point that prayers could no longer mend. The baby was breech, and for the first time in my life, I heard Mrs. Stoltzfus utter the word hospital. The transition was a violent sensory assault. The transition from kerosene shadows to harsh, sterile fluorescent lights hit me like a physical wall. I was surrounded by English nurses who asked cold, confusing questions about birth plans and medical histories I didn't understand. When they finally administered a spinal block for the emergency C-section, the crushing agony simply vanished in an instant. I began to weep uncontrollably, not out of fear for the surgery or the strangers surrounding me, but from a sudden, heartbreaking realization. I realized that this miraculous relief existed in the world, yet it remained entirely out of reach for the women I loved back home. It was a moment of profound clarity that whispered a dangerous question. Why were we destined to suffer? Years later, after I had finally left the community and sought my first real medical examination, the hidden truth was laid bare in a sterile office. Dr. Martinez spoke of extensive scar tissue, pelvic organ prolapse, and chronic anemia, describing my condition with one devastating word: preventable. It was a word that fundamentally rearranged my history and my faith. I realized then that the suffering wasn't merely God's will or an unavoidable tragedy of nature. It was the result of a system that prioritized tradition over a woman's physical well-being. I still hold a deep, complex respect for the midwives like Mrs. Stoltzfus and the undeniable strength of the Amish community that raised me. But I now carry the heavy weight of scars that never had to exist. My body has become a living map of a life survived, a quiet, powerful reminder that while our spirits are forged in endurance, our bodies deserve more than just the silent expectation of pain. We deserve the mercy of being seen.